We spend so much time talking about biases in how we think. But what if the biggest bias of all happens before we even start thinking? In this explainer, we're going to explore that very first filter of our reality. Not what we think, but what we even noticed in the first place.
And this right here is the core idea. It kind of challenges that basic assumption we all have that we're seeing the same objective world. Instead, what if our reality is actually carved out and defined by something much simpler, something automatic, just where our attention happens to land?
Okay, so to bring this down from the clouds a bit, let's just look at some really familiar patterns. And I don't want you to think of these as personal failures or a lack of discipline. See them more as, well, as symptoms of a much deeper structural process going on.
I mean, we've all been here, right? You know something is truly important, but you keep putting it off. Or you get distracted by something loud and immediate, even when you know there's a risk you should be paying attention to. Or, and this is a classic, you choose that quick, easy task over the one that's actually building toward a long-term goal. These patterns aren't random. They're clues.
So to understand why these things are so common, we have to look deeper. We need to look at the very structure of how we perceive things. We need to meet the gatekeeper, the one who decides what even gets into our conscious mind to begin with.
All right, so here's the first principle. It's simple, but it's profound. Our ability to pay attention is not endless. It's a limited, finite resource. And just like any other scarce resource, like time or money, our brain has to constantly decide how to spend it.
And here's the second absolutely crucial principle. That decision, that allocation of attention. It's not usually a conscious choice we make. It's an automatic, pre-conscious process. So before we even get a chance to observe or analyze or think about anything, a version of the world has already been built for us, based entirely on where that limited resource was pointed.
And when you put those two ideas together, that attention is finite and automatically allocated, you land on this really central and profound paradox. It's the strange inverse relationship between what grabs our attention and what is actually truly important.
So let's break this down. Things that are high in stimulus, the urgent email, the breaking news alert, the immediate problem, they're loud. They're demanding. They practically force a reaction out of us. But then you look at things that have high importance, and they're often the complete opposite. They're quiet. They're calm. They're foundational. Just think about some real-world examples. Things like trust in a relationship, or our own long-term health, or the integrity of a complex system, or the stability of the infrastructure we rely on. None of these things send you a push notification. They don't have a high stimulus. They're just quietly, fundamentally important. So here's the kicker. In that silent, constant competition for our limited attention, the quiet but important stuff almost always loses out to the loud but maybe less important stuff. So visibility and importance aren't just disconnected, they often have an inverse relationship. Okay, so what does this all mean? What's the big implication here? Well, if our attention is naturally biased towards things with high stimulus and low importance, it means our reality is being distorted at the most fundamental level, before any other thinking even gets a chance to happen.
And this visual here lays it out perfectly. You see, we tend to worry a lot about step 3, don't we? About thinking clearly, about avoiding biases in our analysis. But the distortion has already happened, way back at step 1. The very terrain we're walking on has already been shaped for us before we even take our first step.
Just let that sink in for a moment. The problem isn't necessarily a failure of our thinking. It's a bias in the raw material we're giving our minds to work with. Maybe the world isn't as noisy and chaotic as it seems. Maybe our attention is just automatically focused on its noisiest and most chaotic parts.
So rather than ending with a nice, neat solution, we're going to leave this with a point of reflection. We've looked at the structure of the problem. Now we can turn that insight inward.
And this isn't just a question for us as individuals, but for us as a whole, as a collective. If it's true that attention shapes our world, then where is our collective attention focused right now? Given what we know about that bias toward high-stimulus things, what parts of the terrain are we all standing on together?
And finally, this leads to the most challenging question of all. What are those foundational, high-importance things that have lost the battle for our attention? What critical systems or relationships or truths have become invisible, not because they've gone away, but simply because they're too quiet to be noticed?